Never imagined I'd see a group of adults attack a 14-year-old child.
Oh, we are calling the cops. It's on.
Hey, leave him alone. Hold the 14-year-old kid.
Yeah, but he's assaulting.
Hold the 14-year-old kid.
He needs to go to jail.
No, because Russ was attacking him.
No, we videoed
Leave him alone.
He's subduing him.
Leave him alone. The 14-year-old kid.
We're not hurting him.
I'm not hurting him.
Hold him.
He assaulted. He assaulted. Citizens arrest.
You don't know the law.
You're about to I'll fucking bust your face up, man.
My son had joined me for the first time on a corner that I'd stand on Sundays between 11 and 12 with a group of very peaceful people who have a rule of non-engagement. And even though people yell at us and scream at us, we just wave and say hi. We never engage in any type of political talk. A group showed up on the other side of the street. They call themselves Trump supporters, but this group is really just a bunch of cowards. And they would yell and harass us.
What a piece of shit!
You need to go.
My signs and political views were probably a bit different than the group that I was standing with. My signs had a strong anti-racist, anti-white supremacist message. I guess the people across the street didn't like my signs because on this day they had researched me, found out who I was, and they had signs with my name and phone number calling me a white supremacist. This in Poway, where just a few miles down the street, a white supremacist a few months before had shot and killed some Jewish worshipers at a synagogue there in Poway. So these cowards obviously were attempting to not only intimidate me, but they had conspired to try to get people to attack me, or at least call me on the phone and harass me for being a white supremacist, which of course I am the opposite of. My family's Hispanic and my son was Hispanic. On that day, they came over to our side of the street while I was leaving with their signs, and I just was laughing at them. I never got angry. I never get violent. I was just laughing and shaming them and calling them cowards and saying, well, call me. Just call me. What is it you guys want people to tell me? Here I am. Talk to me. Just call me. And it seemed to me the more I laughed and the more fun I was having calling them cowards, the more angry they got. One guy came up and spit on me with his whistle. He had a whistle that was very wet with saliva, and he put it up against my nose, about an inch from my nose, and blew spit all over me. Another guy got in my face and told me how he was going to kick my ass and beat my ass, and I just laughed. This is the guy who later, when my back was turned, tackled me. And then another guy gave me like an intimidation bump with his stomach, but I just laughed. I never got violent and never said anything intimidating to them. But that's when I noticed that my son, my 14-year-old child, who had been standing 20 feet away from everybody all by himself out on the grass area, and I was working my way to him, they had gone over to him, and they were starting to yell and say things to him. One of the guys who had two signs, one that said with my name and phone number on it, and another one was right in his face, and he was telling my son, your father's a clown, your father's a piece of shit, your father is teaching you to be just like him, look at you. And because they had researched me and a Facebook page I had, they knew about this attack on my son at Poway High, where a group of 5 or 6 upperclassmen had attacked my son, and they were telling him about that, how he got his ass kicked. And my son said one of these signs that this guy was holding, he was holding 2 signs, kept bumping him in the face. And they did. My son grabbed that sign, and tore it out of this guy's hand and threw it down on the street. After the third or fourth time it bumped on him, and he was left with a stick in his hand. And this is where the video starts that you see. All of a sudden, this guy runs up and starts grabbing for my son. My son was just standing there. He wasn't going to do anything. I was there. We were getting ready to leave. And they started yelling and screaming how they were going to beat my son up. At that time, nothing was focused on me. All of their anger, all of their cowardness, everything was focused on this 14-year-old child.
He's got a stick in his hand.
He's molesting my son. You call a goddamn cop.
And when he saw them coming towards me, you can see him starting just to get back at them. And my son's not a coward, and my son will stick up for himself against bullies. That's the way I raised him. That's the way he always is. I'm 63 years old. My lower left leg is paralyzed. My right wrist is broken. And my son knows that I can't move very fast. And when he saw this guy who had just grabbed at him right in my face, my son moved forward to try to intimidate these guys the same way they were intimidating him, just throwing out that same type of language.
Don't worry.
This guy.
He is. I got it on film.
Psycho.
You call a cop.
Just step
Call
away.
a cop right now.
If that's your son.
Yeah, call a cop.
What a piece of shit.
You need to go.
While I was removing my son, we were moving towards the parking lot. The one guy with the signs stalked back to my son to keep intimidating and terrorizing him, and got right in his face and laughed. And that's when my son hit him in the eye. And that's when they attacked us.
What a piece of shit.
You need to go.
Shut the fuck up, bro. We are calling the cops. It's on.
You can see my back is turned. I'm moving my son towards the parking lot, and I'm tackled from behind. They jump on my son. Again, I'm not getting violent. I'm not swinging. The guy has my son on the ground in a chokehold. You can see his arm is around my son's neck. We get up, and another man threatens my son to beat his face in. He swings a pole at him.
What's up, dog? I'll fucking bust your face up, man.
He squares off with my son with his fist. None of this was directed at me. It was all directed at my son. They follow us up to the parking lot, screaming and yelling at my son.
You're not gonna kill anybody. Hold him.
They march around the car, screaming and yelling, trying to taunt my son, terrorizing my son, and he was terrorized. And then the police show up and arrest my son. They were not interested in anything I had to say. These cowards told me that the police were on their side. They tried to get me thrown in jail, though the police found no reason for me to go to jail because I wasn't threatening or being violent with anybody. I was simply trying to move my 14-year-old child away from these cowards who were just terrorizing him. Took 2 or 3 weeks, a month before the sheriffs would get back to me. After 3 months, in March, I actually went into the sheriff's department. I kept wanting to make a statement. I kept wanting to file a complaint against these cowards who had attacked my child and me. And I wanted to talk to the captain. I got Lieutenant Michael Knob, and he told me he wouldn't take a complaint from me. He wasn't interested in anything I said. I said, "Have you seen the videos?" He said, "Yes." And so I said, "You're telling me that these guys can go up to my son and yell and scream at him and hit him with their signs, and that's not illegal?
What a piece of shit.
You need to go.
This man can run up and start grabbing at my son while he's just standing there doing nothing, and that's not illegal. They can tackle me from behind, and that's not illegal. They can pursue my son and get in his face, and that's not illegal. They can jump on my son and take him to the ground in a chokehold, and that's not illegal. They can threaten to beat my son's face in.
I'll fucking bust your face up, man.
And that's not illegal. They can square off with him with their fist, and that's not illegal. They can swing a flagpole at him, and that's not illegal. They can threaten him and terrorize him and yell and scream at him, a 14-year-old child, and none of that is illegal. Not to mention that when I was shaming them, spitting on me, threatening to beat my face in, and again, bumping me, none of that is illegal. And he just said he wasn't going to do anything. He said, just go to the DA. And that's where we're at now. You in Poway, your 14-year-old child or younger, in the state of California, 14 is the age of a child, can be terrorized by cowards like this, by adults. And all of this stuff can be done to your child without any recourse. And the police told me they will do absolutely nothing.